It's a real honor to have the privilege of introducing today's speakers. I've known Larry Vuillemin and the Vuillemin family for over 60 years. And as a result of, we were neighbors, by the way, and our backyards are literally adjoining each other. And so we have a really rich history with the Vuillemins. And through that relationship, Larry introduced me to Father Norm a couple of years ago. I would just say this: Larry's dad was a very successful attorney in Akron, and actually died when Larry was in high school. And Larry's mother, and my brother would attest to this, you can't say enough things about her. I mean, what an incredible woman, an incredible leader. She actually, for those of you who love history, was involved in serving with Sister Ignatia when AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, was getting started in Akron. And Mrs. Vuillemin really is a true saint. But the reason I wanted to have them come and share with us today is many of us are aware of the wonderful organization of Heart to Heart Ministries here in Akron. And that ministry, that service organization, comes out of the relationship, the living relationship that Larry and Father Norm formed many, many years ago. And so I wanted to have them come and share how that came together and a little bit about their journey and their heart for their message. And so without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Larry and to Father Norm. So welcome, guys.
You're muted.
Well, can I pass the baton to Father Norm first, if that's okay? And then,
Yes.
you know, he usually opens, and I guess I'm the closer. So if that's okay, I'd pass the baton right now to Father Norm, and I'll do some follow-up soon.
Well, hello, everybody. I don't have my collar on today, but hopefully you can see my halo. I am a Catholic priest. Currently, I'm St. Vincent pastor, St. Vincent here in Akron, and I've been a priest for 46 years. And actually, it was only a few years after I was ordained back in 1986, which have been 12 years after I was ordained, that I met Larry. And give you a little background and a little bit focus on how we came together and what Heart to Heart focuses on. And you know that sometimes, we probably all know this, when we meet somebody, sometimes I have a lot of people come to the office and want to talk to me about a lot of different issues and concerns, and Larry was one of them. So coming in, said hello, we listened and talked. But for me, and I think Larry too, there was something that clicked there. You know, there's sometimes people you meet, you resonate with right away. There's almost like that sacred sense that you were supposed to meet this person and connect with this person, which is really amazing, because it was only after a few minutes that I know I had that sense. And part of it, when Larry came, you know, he was talking about some church issues, but as we talked for a while, he asked me, well, Father Norm, glad to meet you. By the way, how are you doing? How do you like ministry? Do you struggle with anything in your life? Or what kind of concerns do you have? Most people, when they came in, never asked me questions. It was always me kind of drawing them out and sharing their concerns. So it struck me that right away, that with Larry, there was making a human connection, and not a connection between some so-called holy priest and some so-called not so holy lawyer, you know. And one of the things that he asked me that stayed with me and was the influence, sometimes it just takes one question. He asked, hey, is there something in our Catholic Christian faith in this parish that can help me, because I've come to a deeper sense of faith in my life and I want to better connect my faith with my work life? Do you have something for that? And I thought, whoa, I hadn't really thought about that, about people at work and how to respond. I know when we had small groups, when I preached, hopefully some of the things made sense for work life, but it never really focused on work. even in the parish. So many things focused on the parish. It's certainly focused on people's families, on people's prayer life, on their growth and everything. But work just never got mentioned by the folks or by me. And so it hit me that that was a whole area that was so important to respond to. I had always seen myself in those 12 years as a pastor who tried to speak homilies that spoke to people's real everyday lives and practical ways to better live faith daily, but without ever speaking specifically about work. So that gave me a whole new awareness and reminded me how important that is, how it's so easy for me or any minister or pastor to right away look at the parishioners as, oh, how can they get involved in the parish? Rather than how can we, this in the parish, the leadership, support and affirm and encourage people in their work life, which is such a big part of people's lives. And I know since then, we've done a lot more programs, church missions, outreach to various workplaces. And I can tell you this, at various places at work or even in church missions, I would ask people, name a time that you experienced God at work. And people would usually look at blank stares. And when even in small groups, and people would say, understandably, gee, I don't know that I've ever experienced God at work. And then I'd say, well, what are some of the spiritual experiences you have? And people would mention legitimately, well, at a worship service, at a prayer meeting, you know, a beautiful day in nature, as was mentioned before, or just some other experience like that, the birth of a baby, the death of a loved one, giving them back to God. But again, people didn't mention work. And one of the things that struck me that I think is part of our culture is we have this kind of notion of the separation of the sacred from the secular. So sacred, that's what I do. Hey, I have a divine calling. I reach out and bring people a deeper sense of God in my life, in their life, and how important that is. But let me ask you this: how many people here would say, "Oh, you know what? A priest or a lawyer has a sacred calling, or a lawyer can actually do ministry"? Probably most people would say, and not even necessarily because lawyers are seen in a bad light. It's just, hey, they don't do ministry. That's not their role. Again, part of it depends upon what we mean by ministry. Certainly reaching out, touching the lives of others, bringing a little more hope and healing, peace and justice, integrity. Those are all important qualities that have a core spirituality, the virtue deep within. And also, again, I think that whole notion of sacred and secular, yes, God shows up in church. God shows up when the baby is born in the hospital, but God doesn't really show up in workplaces, does it? And I think that dichotomy. And there's a scripture that I often like to cite from St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, where he says, there is one God who is Father of us all, works through all, and is in all. And again, do we really believe that? God is in it all, and looking and trying to see how best to see God's presence and cooperate with that presence. I know I remember at one church mission retreat, somebody said to me at that, they said, "Father, I hear you, but if you came to my workplace, you would know that God isn't there." And of course, we talked a little bit about that and said, why? Well, you know, there's pettiness, there's jealousies, there's things that maybe aren't always so ethical. And I said, well, hey, we just heard, and many of us have a faith, belief, whatever our background, that God is an abiding presence in it all. So what's the deeper issue? And as the group talked, they saw, hey, God was there. But like for any of us in work or wherever we are, we can certainly ignore God's presence. We can deny that presence. We can be oblivious to that presence. But the key thing is, what if any of us who have some sense of God in our life, and there may be different understandings of that, said, wow, you know, Lord God, you're here. Help me in knowing you're here to be more open to you and what you ask of me. It isn't a matter that God wasn't there. It was a matter that people were oblivious or even negating the divine presence. Here, on the other hand of that, a number of years ago, I was at a workshop in out west. It was all about faith at work. And there was a woman there who was a CEO of a major company and talking about that work, and people asking practical ways. Well, how do we, without being pushy or heavy handed with any kind of religion, how do we encourage and foster the divine presence at work? And she is the CEO. She said that every single weekly meeting they have with the senior staff, she asks, consciously puts the question out there, in this decision, what does integrity call us to do? And in this decision, what does loving concern call us to do? Because her faith very much influenced what she did, why she did it, and how she did it. And people saw that in her. And when they got in that discussion about integrity and concern, they didn't have to bring up God language, but from her own sense. And they knew this from her faith overall, that was a way to see, yeah, what's this divine calling us to make us a better company and to make us more a company that does the good work that God wants all of us to do. And another part of that, she saw that from Genesis story, that God gives human beings dominion, not domination, and that every one of us in some way are called to partner with God in making the world more the way he wants it. She definitely saw her work as a ministry. She definitely saw her leadership as a sacred calling and lived that out. Another situation with this, a number of you know that in churches or in mosques or certainly in synagogues, people may say, well, who's an active member of this congregation? And people usually think of somebody real involved in the congregation. Pete Berg, who years ago was the CEO of First Energy, he did a lot in the community, helping different groups. He helped in supporting building of the new Red Cross building and a number of things like that, but he wasn't active at the parish. And some people said, well, why isn't Pete active at the parish? Why isn't he an active parishioner? Because they tended to see it's only what you did at church. And I remember saying from the Christian perspective, hey, it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his son. Pete is doing a lot out in the world, and in a really real way, any of us, whatever our faith background, should lead us to want to make that difference in the world. Knowing that. Just want to mention a couple of quick examples of this. There was a man that we met who had a strong faith sense, and he felt his most important ministry and sense of God was a Bible study that he led on Wednesday nights. And that was good. And that was just once a week, feeling a strong sense of serving the Lord. But when he heard about this faith at work message, it struck him and he looked back. He was a supervisor all week. He was in a key position. On Wednesday night, he was trying to foster a community in the Bible study. On Monday through Friday, he really wasn't fostering that sense of community. His whole mindset changed, and he began to see how he was called in leadership to do the will of God, the work of God, to foster integrity, respect, carrying a stronger sense of community and purpose there. That was new to him, and now he saw he didn't just have a purpose once a week, but all week long. Just one more example that I would use that we've all seen is the interviews. There's been interviews, with the pandemic. They interviewed a nurse in one newscast I saw, and she had been working out west. And when New York City, when it was so strong there, she left out west where she had been a nurse helping there and went to New York City. And people said, why did you do that? Why would you go somewhere else? And she mentioned, she said, without trying to be, holy like I'm better than anybody else, I just knew God called me to do this. God put on my heart years ago that what was a great thing I could do is be part of nursing and healing, especially where it was needed the most. And that's why she went. It came grounded in her faith. And so finally, I just say heart-to-heart communications, bringing people together, sharing a lot of different concerns and hopes and struggles and beliefs and just a number of other issues in a heart-to-heart way. And we need more of that in our world today. Heart-to-heart in being considerate of one another, heart-to-heart in being real with one another. With that, I'll stop and let the lawyer lead us forward.
Okay, thank you. Along the way here, if I refer to our friend Father Norm as Norm, there's no disrespect to his priesthood. We're just best friends. And I love the guy. And maybe at its core, heart-to-heart communications is about bringing people together to share what truly matters in their work and in their personal lives. And in doing so, and doing it in safe places, friendships evolve. And I see faces here of folks that I call friend, that I've met, that perhaps under other circumstances, perhaps I never would have come to know. And they've blessed me. And, you know, I can't help but think that Paul Harris, the lawyer, who, what was it, 1905, got together with a couple people and met and just started talking about goodwill and peace in the world. Perhaps in some way, Paul Harris, I connect to his beginnings of the Rotary as a lawyer who maybe was asking a question too. The question I asked when Norm and I met, and the question I asked of myself: how do you practically connect matters of faith, values, ethics with everyday life, with the work that we do out there in the world? You know, and when Norm and I connected, you know, we both realized that there's this sacred secular split out there in the world, that perhaps the work that Norm does, along with the, you know, the ministers and the priests and the other religious, you know, ministers, that the work they do is the sacred stuff, and the work that the rest of us do that's the secular stuff. And maybe, just maybe, we're touched with some grace on some weekend worship experience. You know, and I had some real issues with that when Norm and I first connected. You know, why is not the work that we do out there in the world, you know, that Monday through Friday, why is that not an extension of God's creative presence in the world? Why are we not ministers of faith, hope, and love in the midst of the work that we do, in the midst of everyday life? You know, I always ask so many folks, whether it's in heart to heart or as a spiritual director or even in a law office now and then, you know, are you experiencing the work that you do as life-giving or life-draining? And too often the answer to that question is life-draining, Larry. And perhaps we need to take another look at that. Who am I, really? Who am I in the midst of what I do? You know, in the midst of family, in the midst of whatever career we're involved in, you know, in community life, in the Rotary. You know, who am I? Why am I involved in the Rotary? And God bless you for being involved in the Rotary. God bless you for the work that you do in trying to establish internationally peace and goodwill or truth. You know, God bless you and continue to do it. And I just feel honored and privileged that, you know, okay, maybe Steve, you know, we've been knowing each other for a long time, you know, and friends, along with, you know, his brother Mark and their sister Lori. You know, I feel honored and privileged to be a part of the Rotary. And as I'm thinking about it, and oftentimes, let me warn you, I often get off in Larry land, you know, I can, you know, what can we do better? What can we do more of? And I'm thinking down the road that it would be good for heart-to-heart communication, maybe to further collaborate more and more with what Rotary is doing in this community and beyond, and the principles upon which Rotary is established, which hopefully heart-to-heart is grounded into. Words like being genuine, being fair, being honest and truthful, and hoping that that pours out in the midst of everyday life in the community. And let me go back a quick moment, because as you see, I can get preachy. And forgive me for that, but how can I help from singing with the blessing in my life? As Steve mentioned, our fathers were very influential in our lives back there in Firestone Park back in the day. Jim Bowie, Steve and Mark's dad and Lori's dad, one fine police officer and good man. And my father too. And when my father died when I was just 15, my world crumbled a bit. My mother, a young widow with 6 children ranging in age from 21 to 5. And I was hearing messages like, be a man, Larry, tough it out, Larry. You must be strong for your mother, Larry. And I buried a whole lot of feelings and a whole lot of my spirit. And I still carry some of that to this day. That was 1964, June 13th, when my father died. And suffice it to say that I was a pretty angry young man growing up, still trying to stay grounded to, those moral values that my father and my mother held out as being dear and foundational. And I was raised there at St. Paul's Parish in South Akron. And so much of what I had learned, I began to doubt as a result of that. And truth be told, I pretty much became a functional atheist. I still believed in the presence of God in our life, but I no longer trusted this God, this Lord. And, I'd be lucky enough to get a football scholarship to Notre Dame. And Connor, when you were quoting Johnny Wooden about 1970, that's the year I graduated from Notre Dame. Had the honor of playing for a fellow named Ara Parsegian, who like Johnny Wooden spoke of so much of that, and a lot of injuries nipped my football career in the bud. And I came back to Akron, went to law school at Akron, and upon graduation, joined the county prosecutor's office, somehow was elected an Akron city councilman back in 1980, went into private practice. And boy, I was climbing my ladder of success. And Connor, your invocation struck me too, because you talked about, are we willing to sacrifice personal interests of glory for service to others? I'm not so sure I was. I was pretty self-centered, self-absorbed. Went through a divorce. The prosecutors, when I was at the prosecutor's office, my son and daughter were 7 and 4 at the time. My son, I'll be seeing him this week in Kansas City, and daughter, he just turned 51. Wow. But, as I was climbing my ladder of success and, truth be told, personal interests and the glory, I suffered a stroke on December 13th, 1984. And ultimately, that's what brought Norm and me together. Oh, was it a come to Jesus moment? Oh, maybe so. Or, this near-death experience, you think about, your life. And, and I always say there's nothing like a dose of mortality and a touch of humanity as a real prescription for living. But what it did, it gave me cause and pause to think about the course and direction of my life. And I began to re-enter life. My marriage, my second marriage, which was in trouble, my profession, so much of community life, which was too much about me and not enough about them. And I think Paul Harris, back in 1905, attorney Paul Harris, how do I know? But I suspect that maybe he was struggling too. What can I do as a lawyer to bring people together, to share what truly matters, to share things such as goodwill and peace throughout the world. What can I do? You know, I almost quit the profession. I had such a profound spiritual awakening in my life. I just didn't know, where do I go with this? You know, and the Lord put on my heart, Larry, do what you are doing. The issue isn't what you do, it's why and how you do this work that you're doing. Do what you're doing and re-enter your profession with this new sense of meaning and purpose and ministry. You know, and that word ministry and vocation, you know, that's what they talk about in church and everything. Yeah, a lawyer, you know, I laughingly say, you know, gee, you know, when they were praying for vocations in church, you know, I know they weren't praying for more lawyers, you know, but do you see what the work that you do or what you're doing as ministry out there in the world? You know, and when Norm and I met there in '86, that was the question on my heart. And we began to talk as a guy from North Akron, Norm, and me from South Akron, the priest, the lawyer, you know, breaking through barriers there, you know. How do you practically connect faith, values, and ethics with the work that we do, with everyday life? You know, and Norm suggested, why don't we bring some people together and talk about this stuff? And I noticed that not only was there an interest to talk about this, but there was a hunger to go deeper, to connect heart to heart, such as what the Rotary promotes throughout the world, you know, to bring life to our community, to bring life to what we do, in the hope that maybe through what we do and coming together, we might bless someone else. You know, and heart to heart, that's the origin of it. And we incorporated in 1990 when, you know, things began to grow, and lawyers group, doctors group, educators, and we do a lot of programs. And, you know, just to not go over the limit here, just bring you up to date with what we're doing now. Jeremy Lyle is now our executive director. You know, when Norm was called to pastor St. Vincent Parish, you know, we brought together some folks, and little did we know that we saw any number of emerging leaders, you know, the younger folks asking some of the same questions that we asked, that we shared with each other. And now we're, you know, more recently, we certified a team of coaches, you know, in a purposeful leadership program that we've established, you know, to work with community leaders and how they might be of a blessing to the organizations that they serve, to inspire leadership at every level of their organizations, to inspire leadership throughout the community. You know, why don't I end there? And because I'll go on, but you know, like the hymn, how can I help, or how can I keep from singing? And Steve, thanks for asking us. Mark, love you too there, neighbor and a fellow attorney, and, you know, following your dad's footsteps as an officer of the law at one time. Just thank you. You take me back to where it all began. And what we learned as kids still is alive and well right now. And if there was ever a time for any of us to promote goodwill and peace in the world, it's now. So God bless you, Rotarians, for all that you do. And thank you for the honor and privilege of being with you over this lunch hour on this day. God bless you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciated your heartfelt messages. And Brian, we probably only have time for one or two quick questions, but I will submit that if you have some breathing room in your schedules, we do keep our meeting open for 15 minutes after we officially adjourn. So Brian, do you want to field any questions?
All right, are there any questions?
We covered it all, huh?
Yep, don't everybody jump at once.
That's-
Hey, Brian, I've got a question.
Yep.
So Father Norm, how do you guys, what's the process that a business would go about trying to reach out to you and see if there can be a match there between what they're looking for and what you guys can offer them?
Well, I could probably mention Larry if need be to follow up. You can call the heart-to-heart number or go on the first, maybe even go on a website and see the kinds of things that are done there, and then to give a call. A couple of the key people, obviously, Jeremy is the executive director. There's also a woman, her name is Chris, and she also is very involved. And they're probably two of the people that you could talk to. They probably have the best knowledge of the programs and the interests. And what Heart to Heart has always tried to do is not just have a pat program, put in the can, but talk to the leader, talk to some people there and see what might be the best way to foster the kind of virtues that we're talking about here.
Terry? Was that Terry Dalton?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah, Terry, Michael, your son, isn't Mike your son, Mike
Yep,
Dalton?
sure is.
Yeah, well, what a neat young man he was. He got involved with a group that we were doing out at SUMA when he was with SUMA, and he really was an inspiration too. But to answer your question, as Norm said, check our website. It's www.h2h.org, h2h.org, and a lot of programs we're doing, and we're trying to expand it. We're trying to involve more and more of the younger leaders and the emerging leaders. I thought I saw Doug Cole out there. I know that Doug's son, that there's a collaboration with Jeremy and Doug's son and some of the good work they're doing, and in Leadership Akron. But the number of the office too is 330-434-3278. I'm retired now pretty much as lawyer, and I'm the director of community impact for Heart to Heart. I'm not sure exactly what that means yet. It's kind of a title they give old co-founders, and but indeed, thanks for your question. And please feel free to reach out to us, not just for much we have to offer you, but for what you have to offer us. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you, gentlemen. We're at the end of our hour, and I can attest that when I joined Akron Children's, one of the most pleasant surprises to me was how involved our organization was with Heart to Heart and how meaningful that's been. So I thank you personally for that and for your remarks. And if you're able to stay on, I'll adjourn the meeting. I want to remind people that next week we have a special guest. District Governor Pat Myers will be joining us. So please come on and celebrate our district governor. And Lauren Hawley, I hope you saw this meeting as maybe a next step to come back again next week. So welcome. And at this point, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. And you see my crystal ball next to my bell. I have to take one shot. I guess it got taken out of my hands, so maybe I have more than I bargained for next week.
Before a relationship that Rotary had years back with Heart to Heart, Doug Housknecht and I were doing some work with the four-way test. And Doug suggested that Steve Hallam, who was a Rotarian and became the dean of the business college, could help us put together a program based on the four-way test for small business ethics promotion. And Father Norm and Larry and Steve collaborated, and we put together a program that was very impactful. And I say shamefully that we haven't pursued it and kept it moving. We were able to present for the State Department to a group of real estate people from the Soviet Union that were struggling with how they did honorable things and while still having to work with a dishonorable government. And I want to thank Doug Housknecht for introducing me to these guys, and suggest to Doug and to Larry and to Father Norm that maybe we should sit down and revive this.
Hmm,
It
Yeah.
was sound work, and Steve put many sacred hours into it.
yes.
Thank you, Norm. Thank you, Larry. And thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I may say, Steve Hallam, you know, now deceased, but former dean of the business school at the University of Akron, he invited Father Norm and I into his classes there at the business school to talk about this, you know, and he maybe took a risk or two in doing that, you know, but I found that the graduate students there at the business school were anxious as well to explore some of these areas, and then just throw it to you, Norm, for any comment. But one of the another privilege that I had was co-authoring a book with Father Norm and Dean Steve Hallam called How in the World Do We Make a Difference? And just doing it was a real blessing. And God love you, Steve, and thank you.
One quick example of that was Steve's class. I remember that he had a business community, and there were people from China there, India there, many different cultures. And we ended up talking about spirituality. And certainly Steve was open to that. He wondered how it would go. We weren't trying to foster a specific Christian spirituality, although we were bringing up the kind of spirituality that we were grounded in, and talking with the whole group to see where and how do they see spirituality having an influence or not having an influence in their work life. And it was powerful because I still remember several of the people from China were very struck by that and very open and wanted to better understand that.
Jack, I didn't want to leave that hang either. I would enjoy reconnecting, and maybe reach out to you through Steve Bowie. And my wife always telling me now, you know, that I need to start saying no to things. But I said yes to this years ago. So, you know, this is just a continuing yes. So maybe we ought to reconnect. I would enjoy just doing that. And maybe there's.
I'll be in touch with you.
We all know how to find the Akron Family Restaurant.
Whoa, there's Doug. Where'd he show up?
There's Doug.
Father Norm and Larry, this is Cheryl Warren. I just want to thank you. What a great inspirational message. And I wasn't sure I was going to make it today. Prior to this, I was on a call with 200 countries involved. I'm a past district governor of our district here for Rotary. And we had 530 of the 535 district governors from my year present. And it was tough to leave that meeting because it was so inspirational, but I'm so glad I did. You really touched me today. And thank you. I just can't say enough. Thank you very much.
And Larry, I want to say from my heart to your heart and to Norm, thank you guys so much. And thank you for the reference even about Paul Harris, because it's so true that for a lack of a better description, your DNA and our DNA is the same DNA. And it's wanting to make a difference and make the world a better place. And I've said for the longest time, we don't have a resource problem. What we have is a distribution problem. And when we get connected in right relationships that are built and rooted and established and maintained in mutual respect and love, we can change the world. And there's something special, and I'm not trying to make this happen, but there's something special in the DNA of our city. I really believe that with all my heart. And when you have something as wonderful as AA that started here and took root here and went and continues to go to the ends of the earth, we've got that. So thank you guys.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
And I want to extend an invitation for both of you. You know, if you're retired or semi-retired, you know, you probably could squeeze in a Rotary meeting or two over the next several weeks. You have a standing invite to join us. And Larry, I would like to offline sometimes chat with you about your physicians group that you had with Heart to Heart, or Norm, I'm not sure who was the spearhead for that. But I want to share an initiative that I've gotten support from my board to do a collaborative work with SUMA on physician wellness. I mean, we all need wellness opportunities, but docs have an inherent bias about getting help. And I'd like to hear some of your lessons learned. So maybe we can connect, and I can figure out how to be smarter about doing this new not-for-profit that Children's and SUMA are standing up for the providers in our community.
Good.
Yeah, I would look forward to that, Rob. You know, Norm and I have often talked about the word compassion fatigue among professional caregivers, and especially nowadays, it's or I've heard it talked about vicarious trauma sometimes. And we've worked with SUMA in the past. And by the way, Dr. Joe Congini, who you know, works at Children's Hospital, and he is one of the early members of that group and of the doctors group. So let's talk.
Yeah, I can tap Joe because technically he reports to me, so I'll call him into the principal's office.
Yes.
Well, ask Joe about the roots of Heart to Heart. You know.
All right. Anybody else have some questions, since these gentlemen have been generous enough to extend their time a little bit?
I just want to say to both of them and to everybody that my heart's been restored, and we've been going through some struggles in many areas and this was a confirmation for me that it's okay. And thank you.
Thank you for your openness. Thank you.
I heard someone mention retirement, and I can't imagine our community without the two of you. What is your plan for succession with Heart to Heart?
Well, I think you heard a little bit, Larry, you can add. I left Heart to Heart 4.5 years ago, being called by the bishop of our diocese to come and be pastor at St. Vincent. And it was kind of short notice. I was going to leave in June, but then this happened in March. And we had already been mentoring Jeremy Lyle, whose name was mentioned, and he was already part-time on board. And then I said, Jeremy, I'm leaving quicker. Can you come a little more on board? Which he did more. And then it kind of was they called him a community, operating person, the operations, charge of operations, so that the board would get to know him and see, is Jeremy the right person to become the executive director? And clearly showed then and ever since then that absolutely true. And Jeremy thinks he's getting older now because he just turned 40 last week. I said, Jeremy, you got a lot more time to do a lot more things. And he's gotten a lot of younger people and all that social media stuff that people our age still have a difficult time with. But there's a great board. Larry's still part of that board. And so that succession planning is happening. Maybe they won't need another one for 30 years.
Well, we'd also like to extend the invitation to him to come to our meetings as well.
Oh, yes, sure.
We'd love to meet him and get to know him as part of our community.
I'll follow up on that, Cheryl. Yeah, Jeremy's one fine community presence, and man, he's just a wonderful guy. We're blessed to have him.
And we're not real secret at this point. We've been fortunate with our Zoom meetings, but we do post our Zoom information and login out on our website. So we do try to keep track of who's coming into our meetings, but definitely we would love to have him and you back.
Yeah, and Cheryl, is like this Zoom, is this something that if people wanted to see it later this afternoon or tomorrow, that it's available?
Yes, we'll be posting it on YouTube, but then we will also post it to our website and in our newsletter. But it will be there, and I can email you the link as soon as I get it. I'm going to do a little editing since we dropped the bell at the end, yes, it'll take me about a day to get it ready.
Not a problem.
Thank you for asking.
You're welcome.
Sorry, Cheryl.
Father Norm, are you still
Okay.
doing some of the retreats yourself? Because I know in my main parish is St. Bernard's, but occasionally we were at St. Hilary's in the days where people could actually come and feel safe before the pandemic. But if anyone hasn't had the opportunity to hear you speak, when it comes to being motivated, just listening to you, when you used to do some of the retreats at St. Hilary's at 4 o'clock mass, is just tremendous. And for Larry, again, thank you for all the support you provided over the years when I was the CEO at Community Support Services. Because again, it was really great to know that support that you provided for our staff as well. So, but
I
Well-
can tell you this, good timing on what you asked of me. I am doing a session about 90 minutes with, it's going to be interactive, but it's going to be, no, it's going to be live, I guess. I'm going to St. Hilary's this Thursday, 2 days from now at 7 p.m. They're meeting in the church, just like they would do in a Sunday service, and they're separating out, so there's distance from everybody. And basically, I'm talking from obviously a Christian, but a broad spiritual basis too, of what it means, especially in everything we're dealing with. What do we need to let go of? What do we need to open up to, and in what ways do we need to move on? Not only as a people, but in our own individual lives, that all that's going on here gives us the opportunity. We didn't pick it, we wouldn't want it, but to really step back and look at our personal lives and our life as a people, and what the Spirit of the living God may be saying to us through these things, again, with people's personal maybe calls or journeys, and also what that means together.
yeah. Thanks.
Well, it's just about 1:15 and our Zoom will run out. It turns into a pumpkin after certain times.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate your generosity and your uplifting message. And we're glad so many of our members could still stick around. So thanks, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Bless you. Thank you.